Pain shot through Damian Blackwood's shoulder the moment he opened his eyes, sharp and burning, like fire pressed against his skin. He sat up fast, his heart pounding, and looked down at his own arm. A mark glowed there. Dark red lines curling into a shape he knew too well. A mate mark, his mate mark. He froze. The room around him was not his own chamber. The curtains were pale blue, not black. The scent in the air was soft, like lavender and rain, nothing like the heavy cedar smell of his own quarters. His head throbbed from the wolfsbane wine he had swallowed the night before. Memories broken into pieces that refused to fit together. Then he heard breathing beside him. He turned slowly, dread rising in his chest, and saw her. A young woman lay asleep under the blanket, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her face calm and unaware of the storm about to break over her life. On her neck, faint but unmistakable, was the same mark that now burned on his own skin. Elena Ross. He knew her name because everyone in Blackwood Pack knew the healer's daughter, the quiet girl who worked in the medical hall, who never sought attention, who had no rank, no army behind her family, no political weight to offer a king. She was nobody important. She was not supposed to be anybody to him at all. But the mark did not care about politics. Damian pressed his palm against his forehead, trying to force the fog of the previous night to clear. Fragments returned to him slowly. The coronation feast. The betrayal that had shattered him hours before the crowning. The words from Celine, the woman he had trusted, the woman he had planned to make his Luna, saying she wanted power more than she wanted him. The wolfsbane wine burning down his throat, glass after glass, an attempt to drown out the humiliation in front of his own pack. After that, nothing. A blur of laughter, movement, someone guiding him through a hallway. He remembered warmth. He remembered a voice, soft and startled, saying his name. And now this. Elena stirred beside him, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she looked peaceful, still caught between sleep and waking. Then her gaze landed on him, on the mark burning on his arm, and understanding crashed into her all at once. She scrambled back so fast she nearly fell off the bed, pulling the blanket against her chest, her eyes wide with shock. "What?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "What happened?" Damian did not answer immediately. He was still staring at the mark on her neck, disbelief and horror twisting together inside him. This could not be real. He was the Alpha King. Today was supposed to be his coronation, the day he stood before his entire pack as their ruler. Strong, composed, untouchable. Instead, he had woken beside a stranger, with a mate bond neither of them had chosen. "Say something," Elena said, panic rising in her tone. She touched her own neck and gasped when her fingers found the mark, warm under her skin. "This is not possible. This cannot be real." "It's real," Damian said quietly, his voice rough. "I don't know how, but it's real." Elena shook her head, backing further away, though there was nowhere left to go. "I don't understand. I don't even remember coming here. I was helping close the medical hall after the feast, and then someone said the king needed a healer, and I followed them. And then..." She stopped, her breath catching. "I don't remember anything after that." Damian's jaw tightened. Someone had brought her to him. Someone had let this happen, whether by accident or by design, and he intended to find out who. But that question would have to wait, because a knock sounded on the door, sharp and urgent. "My king," came the voice of Marcus, his most trusted beta and closest friend since childhood. "The council is asking for you. The coronation ceremony begins in less than an hour, and there are rumors already spreading through the halls." Damian's blood ran cold. Rumors, that meant someone already knew. "Give me a moment," he called out, keeping his voice steady though his mind was racing. Elena had gone pale. "Rumors? About what? About us?" "I don't know yet," Damian admitted. "But we need to think clearly. Whatever happened last night, whoever guided me here, we cannot let panic control us now." "Easy for you to say," Elena snapped, fear sharpening her words. "You're the king. I'm nobody. Do you understand what will happen to me if the pack finds out the Alpha King's mate mark landed on a healer's assistant the night before his coronation? They will say I trapped you. They will say I planned this to steal power I don't even want." Damian looked at her, really looked at her. and for the first time since waking he saw past his own shock to notice the terror in her eyes. She was right to be afraid. Pack politics were brutal, and a mark like this, appearing under such strange circumstances, would draw suspicion from every noble family hungry for influence, especially those who had hoped their own daughters might one day stand beside the king. "No one will touch you," he said, surprising himself with how firm the words came out. "Whatever this is, whatever happened, you did not force this mark onto me. I will not let anyone say otherwise." Elena stared at him, uncertain whether to believe a king she had barely spoken to before that morning. "You don't even know me." "No," he admitted. "I don't. But I know a trick when I hear one being set up, and I know panic will only feed it. We need answers before we face anyone." She wrapped the blanket tighter around herself, her mind clearly spinning through the impossible situation. "What do we do?" Before Damien could answer, another knock came, faster this time, and the door creaked open despite his lack of permission. Marcus stepped inside, then stopped abruptly, his eyes widening as he took in the scene before him, Elena on one side of the bed, Damien on the other, the marks visible on both their skin. "Great moon above," Marcus muttered, closing the door quickly behind him and lowering his voice. "Tell me this is not what it looks like." "I wish I could," Damien said grimly. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, pacing a few steps before facing them again. "The whole castle is already whispering. Someone said they saw a woman being led toward your chambers last night. They're saying it was arranged, that the healer's daughter seduced her way into a mark to gain status." He glanced at Elena apologetically. "I'm sorry, but that's the story spreading right now." "That's a lie," Elena said, her voice trembling with anger now instead of fear. "I never went anywhere near his chambers on my own. Someone led me there. Someone gave me something, because the last thing I clearly remember is drinking a cup of tea one of the guards handed me, saying the king requested a healer." Damien's eyes sharpened. "A guard gave you tea?" "Yes. I didn't think anything of it at the time." Marcus and Damien exchanged a look. If someone had drugged Elena and brought her to the king's chambers, this had not been an accident caused by wolfsbane wine alone. Someone had planned this, using Damien's drunken state and grief over Celine's betrayal as the perfect opportunity. "This was arranged," Damien said slowly, anger replacing his earlier shock. "Someone wanted this mark to happen. But who would benefit from that?" Marcus asked. "The healer's family has no real power. Elena gaining status doesn't threaten anyone directly. Unless it isn't about helping her," Damien said. "Unless it's about hurting me, making me look weak on the very day I'm supposed to prove my strength to the entire pack." Elena's breath caught. "You think someone did this to sabotage your coronation?" "I think it's the only explanation that makes sense," Damien said, his voice hardening with resolve. "And I intend to find out who." The sound of horns echoed faintly through the castle walls, distant but unmistakable, signaling that the coronation preparations were moving forward whether he was ready or not. Marcus's expression tightened. "My king, whatever the cause, the mark is done. It cannot be undone. And in less than an hour, you are expected to stand before the entire pack. If they see the mark before you explain it yourself, the rumors will win. You need to control this story now, not later." Damien looked at Elena, who sat frozen, clearly overwhelmed by how quickly her ordinary life had been swept into a storm, far bigger than herself. She had done nothing wrong, and yet she stood at the center of a scandal that could destroy her future in a single day. "I won't let you be thrown to the wolves for something you didn't choose," Damien said quietly, meeting her eyes. "Whatever happens next, we face it together, at least until we understand what really happened last night." Elena swallowed hard, fear and uncertainty still clear on her face, but something steadier settled into her expression as well, a quiet determination to survive whatever came through those doors. "Then let's go face them," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "before they decide the story for us." Damien nodded, rising to his feet, the weight of the crown he was about to receive suddenly feeling heavier than ever before. Whatever plans anyone had made to destroy him on this day, he refused to let them succeed, and he refused to let an innocent woman pay the price for someone else's cruelty. The horn sounded again, closer now, calling him toward a coronation that would look nothing like the one he had imagined. The grand hall fell silent the moment Damien walked in with Elena beside him. both of them dressed hastily in formal clothes that did nothing to hide the tension in their bodies. Every noble family of Blackwood pack stood gathered beneath tall stone arches, their eyes sharp with curiosity, judgment, and hunger for gossip. At the front of the room, seated on carved wooden chairs, waited the pack council, elders whose approval could make or break a king's reign before it even began. Damien felt every gaze land on the faint mark still visible at the edge of his collar, no matter how carefully he had tried to cover it. Word had already spread. There was no hiding from it now. Elder Nathaniel, the oldest and most respected member of the council, rose slowly from his seat, his expression unreadable. "Alpha Damien," he said, his voice carrying easily through the silent hall. "Before this coronation proceeds, we must address the mark that many claim to have seen on your arm this morning. Is it true you have been marked?" There was no point denying it. Lying now would only make things worse if the truth came out later. Damien squared his shoulders and answered clearly, "It is true. I carry a mate mark, given last night." Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by hushed whispers that spread from row to row, like fire through dry grass. Damien raised a hand, silencing them before they could spiral further. "However," he continued, his voice firm, "the circumstances surrounding this mark are not what has been whispered through these halls. I did not choose this recklessly, and Elena Ross did not seek this position through deception." At the mention of her name, every eye shifted toward Elena, who stood straight despite the trembling she fought to hide. She had never imagined standing before the entire pack council, let alone under circumstances like these. From near the front of the crowd, a woman stepped forward, her golden hair pinned elegantly, her expression a careful mixture of concern and superiority. Celine, the very woman whose betrayal had driven Damien to drink the night before. "Forgive me for speaking so directly," Celine said sweetly, though her eyes glinted with something colder beneath the surface. "But is it not strange that on the very night I ended things between us, the king suddenly finds himself marked to another woman? A woman with no family influence, no political standing, someone conveniently available to slip into his chambers while he was too intoxicated to think clearly?" Murmurs of agreement rose from several nobles, exactly the reaction Celine had hoped to provoke. Elena's face burned with humiliation, but she forced herself to stay silent, remembering Damien's earlier words about not feeding the panic. "That is a serious accusation," Elder Nathaniel said slowly, turning his gaze toward Elena. "Do you have anything to say in your defense, child?" Elena took a steadying breath before speaking. "I did not seek out the king's chambers on my own. Last night, after the feast ended, I was closing the medical hall when a guard approached me, claiming the king required a healer immediately. He handed me a cup of tea, said it would help calm my nerves before meeting him, and that is the last clear memory I have before waking this morning in his chambers." "A convenient story," Celine said smoothly, though a flicker of unease crossed her expression, quickly hidden. "Do you have proof of this guard? A name, perhaps?" "I did not recognize him," Elena admitted honestly. "It was dark, and I was focused on hurrying to help, not memorizing faces." Whispers grew louder again, some sympathetic, many skeptical. Damien stepped forward before the tide could turn entirely against Elena. "I intend to find this guard," Damien said, his voice carrying authority that silenced the room once more. "If someone within these walls arranged this deception, they will be found and punished according to pack law. Until then, no accusations against Elena will be treated as fact, only as unproven claims." Elder Nathaniel studied Damien carefully, his expression thoughtful. "Regardless of how the mark occurred, King Damien, you know as well as I do that a mate mark cannot be undone once formed. Pack law is clear on this matter. A marked bond, once confirmed by both parties waking beside one another, is binding." Damien's jaw tightened. He had hoped there might be some loophole, some ritual to reverse what had happened, but he already knew the ancient laws well enough to expect this answer. "I am aware of the law, Elder." "Then the pack must decide how to proceed," Nathaniel continued. "A king cannot rule without addressing his mate bond publicly. Ignoring it will only invite further rumors and instability, especially with rival packs watching closely for any sign of weakness in your leadership." Celine's eyes lit up at this opening. Perhaps, then, it would be wisest to allow a formal investigation period. during which the girl remains under observation before any official status is granted. After all, we cannot simply hand Luna's status to someone who appeared from nowhere overnight. The suggestion sounded reasonable on the surface, cautious and fair, but Damien recognized the trap hidden within it immediately. An investigation period would give Celine and her allies plenty of time to dig up or invent reasons to discredit Elena, all while appearing to follow proper procedure. Before Damien could respond, Elena surprised everyone, including herself, by speaking again. "I agree to an investigation," she said clearly, lifting her chin, despite the fear still coiled tightly in her chest. "If there are doubts about how this happened, then let the truth be found. I have nothing to hide, and I would rather prove my innocence than have it whispered about behind my back forever." A ripple of surprise passed through the hall at her boldness. Even Celine seemed momentarily thrown off by the confident response, having expected Elena to crumble under pressure rather than embrace the challenge. Elder Nathaniel nodded slowly, clearly pleased by her willingness to face scrutiny openly. "Very well. Elena Ross will remain within the castle under the king's household, undergoing formal training and observation befitting a potential Luna, until the truth of last night's events is uncovered and the council reaches a final decision regarding her status." "And what of the coronation?" another council member asked. "Can it proceed today with such uncertainty hanging over the king's mate bond?" Damien answered before Nathaniel could. "The coronation will proceed as planned. My right to rule was earned through strength and loyalty long before last night's events. Whatever happens with my personal bond does not change my fitness to lead this pack." Several elders nodded in agreement, murmurs of support beginning to outweigh the doubtful whispers. Celine's expression tightened almost imperceptibly, her earlier plan clearly not unfolding exactly as she had hoped. The coronation continued that afternoon, though it carried none of the celebratory warmth Damien had once imagined for the day. He knelt before the council, received the crown that marked him as Alpha King of Blackwood Pack, and rose to the sound of applause that felt hollow compared to the storm of uncertainty surrounding him. Elena watched from the side of the hall, feeling like an outsider intruding on a moment that should have belonged entirely to him, yet somehow now tangled permanently with her own fate as well. She caught Damien's eyes briefly as he stood tall beneath his new crown, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them, neither trust nor comfort exactly, but perhaps the beginning of an uneasy alliance against forces neither of them fully understood yet. After the ceremony ended, and the crowd slowly dispersed into smaller clusters of gossip and speculation, Marcus approached Damien and Elena near a quiet corridor, away from prying ears. "That went about as well as it could have, given the circumstances," Marcus said quietly. "But Celine isn't finished. She wouldn't have pushed for an investigation period unless she already has something planned." "I know," Damien said grimly. "Which means we need to find that guard before she does, and figure out exactly who benefits from this chaos." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, still processing the whirlwind of the past few hours. "This morning I was simply the healer's daughter, preparing herbs for the sick. Now I'm apparently under investigation to determine if I'm fit to be a Luna I never asked to become." Damien looked at her, a flicker of something like guilt crossing his features. "I know this isn't the life you chose. I'm sorry you've been pulled into it." "Sorry doesn't undo a mark," Elena said, though not unkindly, simply stating the truth they both now had to live with. "No," Damien agreed quietly, "it doesn't, but I meant what I said in that hall. I will find out who did this, and I will make sure you're protected while we figure out what comes next." Elena studied him for a long moment, uncertain whether to trust the sincerity in his voice, or brace herself for the political games clearly already swirling around them both. Eventually, she gave a small, tired nod. "Then I suppose," she said, "we start today." As the three of them moved deeper into the castle to begin planning their next steps, none of them noticed the figure watching quietly from a shadowed alcove nearby, someone who had orchestrated the events of the previous night, with far more precision than anyone yet suspected, and who had no intention of letting their plan unravel so easily. 3 days after the coronation, Elena found herself standing in a training room she had never expected to enter, surrounded by tutors hired to shape her into someone capable of standing beside a king. A posture instructor corrected the way she held her shoulders. A etiquette teacher drilled her on which fork belonged where at a formal dinner. which titles required a bow and which required only a nod. None of it felt real. 3 days ago she had been grinding herbs into paste for a farmer's fever. Now she was learning how to address a visiting alpha from a neighboring territory without causing offense. Chin up, back straight, the etiquette teacher, a sharp woman named Grace, who had somehow become the only person in the castle Elena felt comfortable around, reminded her gently. You carry yourself like you're apologizing for existing. A Luna does not apologize for taking up space. I'm not a Luna, Elena reminded her for what felt like the 100th time. I'm someone under investigation, who happens to be required to learn Luna etiquette in case the investigation somehow clears me. Grace smiled, unbothered by the correction. Semantics. Chin up. Elena obeyed, though the motion still felt foreign, like wearing someone else's skin. Since the coronation, her days had become a strange blur of lessons, quiet meals, taken alone in her new chambers, and careful avoidance of the whispers that followed her whenever she walked through the castle halls. The mark on her neck had settled into a permanent reminder of a night she still didn't fully understand, a warmth that occasionally pulsed faintly whenever Damien was nearby, something neither of them spoke about directly. She saw him rarely, and when she did, their conversations remained brief and businesslike. Updates on the investigation into the guard who had drugged her, reports on Celine's continued presence in the castle, despite no longer holding any official position beside the king. Damien kept his distance carefully, as if afraid that closeness might complicate an already complicated situation further, though Elena sometimes caught him watching her from across a room, with an expression she couldn't quite name. That evening, as she made her way toward the private dining hall for what she assumed would be another solitary meal, she found Damien already seated at the table, a rare sight given how carefully he had avoided her company since the coronation. You're here, she said, surprised enough to state the obvious. Marcus insisted I actually eat a full meal today instead of working through it, Damien admitted, gesturing toward the empty seat across from him. Apparently my temper has been noticeably worse when I skip meals. Elena hesitated only a moment before sitting down, curiosity outweighing her usual caution around him. Any progress on finding the guard? Damien's expression darkened slightly. None yet. Whoever arranged this covered their tracks well. The guard who approached you that night doesn't match any name or description on our official roster. Either someone impersonated a guard entirely, or someone erased all record of his existence afterward. That sounds like someone with real influence, Elena said quietly. Someone who could access castle records and alter them without raising suspicion. Exactly what worries me, Damien agreed, which narrows the list of suspects considerably, but not enough to act on yet. They ate in silence for a while, the quiet surprisingly comfortable rather than tense, before Elena spoke again. Can I ask you something honestly? Damien looked up, something guarded flickering across his face before he nodded. Go ahead. Do you regret it? The mark, I mean. Waking up bonded to someone you never chose. He set down his fork slowly, considering the question with more care than she expected. I regret the circumstances, he said finally. I regret that you were pulled into danger and scandal because of something done to both of us without our consent. But I don't know if I regret the mark itself, because I genuinely don't know what to feel about something I never had the chance to choose. That's a very careful answer, Elena said, though not unkindly. It's an honest one, Damien countered. What about you? Do you regret it? Elena considered the question seriously, rather than offering a quick, easy response. I regret how it happened. Being drugged, being used as a pawn in someone else's scheme, having my entire life turned upside down without warning. But when I think about the mark itself, separate from all of that, she paused, searching for honest words. I don't know either. It's strange. I keep waiting to feel trapped, resentful, but mostly, I just feel curious about what happens next, which honestly frightens me more than resentment would. Something shifted in Damien's expression at her answer, a flicker of surprise, perhaps even relief, quickly masked, but not quickly enough for Elena to miss entirely. Their quiet conversation was interrupted by Marcus entering the dining hall with clear urgency in his stride. My king, we've found something. One of the stable hands remembers seeing an unfamiliar man in guard's uniform near the servants' entrance, the night of the coronation feast. He didn't recognize him either, but he remembers something specific. What's that? Damien asked, straightening immediately. A ring. The man was wearing a distinctive silver ring shaped like a crescent moon, wrapped in thorns. The stable hand noticed it because it caught torchlight strangely as the man passed by. Elena's breath caught. "I've seen that ring before." Both men turned toward her sharply. "Where?" Damien asked. "At the feast," Elena said, memory sharpening as she focused. "On Captain Caleb's hand, during the toast before the wolfsbane wine was served. I noticed it, because it seemed like an unusual piece of jewelry for someone in his position." Damien's expression turned to stone. "Caleb commands my personal guard. He would have had access to the wolfsbane wine before it was served, access to guard uniforms for impersonation, and enough trust within the castle to move unnoticed." "But why would he do this?" Elena asked. "What could he possibly gain from sabotaging your coronation?" "Unless he wasn't acting alone," Marcus said grimly. "Unless someone paid him to arrange this, someone with enough influence to make it worth the risk of betraying the king directly." The three of them exchanged a heavy look, the same suspicion clearly forming in all their minds simultaneously, though none of them said the name aloud yet, wary of accusing someone so powerful without solid proof. "Bring Caleb to me quietly," Damien instructed Marcus. "No announcements, no witnesses. I want to speak with him directly, before word of our suspicions spreads." Marcus nodded and left swiftly to carry out the order, leaving Damien and Elena alone once more in the dining hall, the earlier lightness of their conversation replaced by tense anticipation. "If it truly was Celine," Elena said slowly, "what happens then?" "Then she faces consequences for endangering pack stability and manipulating a coronation through deception," Damien said, his voice hard. "Regardless of our past relationship, I won't protect her from the consequences of orchestrating something this dangerous." Elena studied him carefully. "You still care about her, though. I saw it in your face during the council meeting, when she spoke." Damien was quiet for a long moment before answering honestly. "I cared about her for a long time before her betrayal. Old feelings don't disappear overnight, even when someone proves they don't deserve them. But caring about someone's past self doesn't mean excusing what they may have done now." Elena appreciated his honesty, even though something about his admission left an unexpected ache in her chest that she chose not to examine too closely. 2 days later, Marcus successfully brought Caleb before Damien in a private chamber, away from the rest of the castle. The guard captain's confident demeanor cracked quickly under Damien's direct questioning, his composure crumbling further when confronted with the stable hand's description of the ring, still visible on his finger. "I didn't want to do it," Caleb finally admitted, his voice shaking with fear and shame. "She threatened my family, said she would have my sister removed from her position in the healing hall permanently if I refused. All I had to do was drug the healer's assistant and lead her to your chambers after you'd had enough wine to lose clear memory. I didn't know exactly what she planned beyond that." "Who threatened you?" Damien demanded, though he already suspected the answer. Caleb hesitated only a moment before answering. "Celine." The confirmation settled heavily over the room, transforming suspicion into certainty. Celine had orchestrated the entire scheme, using Caleb's fear for his family to arrange Elena's presence in Damien's chambers, likely hoping the scandal would either destroy Damien's credibility before his coronation, or create chaos she could exploit for her own advantage afterward. "Why would this benefit her?" Elena asked, still struggling to understand the motive fully. She ended things with Damien herself. Why sabotage a coronation for someone she claimed she no longer wanted? "Because ending things publicly and losing status entirely are two very different outcomes," Marcus said grimly. By staging a scandal involving the king's mark landing on someone unworthy in the pack's eyes, she likely hoped to position herself as the reasonable, dignified alternative, someone the council might push forward as a better choice once your investigation failed and public opinion turned against you. Elena felt sick at the calculated cruelty of the plan, at how easily her entire life had been treated as a tool in someone else's political maneuvering. Damien's expression had turned colder than Elena had ever seen it, fury barely contained beneath his controlled exterior. "Marcus, arrange for Celine to be brought before the council immediately. This time, there will be no room for clever words or half-truths to protect her." As Marcus departed to carry out the order, Damien turned to Caleb, who stood trembling, awaiting judgment for his role in the scheme. "Your family will be protected from Celine's threats," Damien said, his tone firm, but not entirely without mercy. But you will face consequences for your participation in this deception, regardless of the coercion involved. Loyalty tested under pressure still matters, and you chose wrongly. Caleb nodded, accepting the judgment with quiet resignation, grateful at least that his family would remain safe despite his own punishment ahead. Once Caleb had been escorted away, Elena remained standing beside Damien, processing everything that had just been revealed. "It's strange," she said quietly. "Finally knowing the truth doesn't make me feel better. It just makes everything feel heavier." "I understand that feeling," Damien admitted. "Uncovering betrayal rarely brings relief, even when it confirms what you already suspected." Elena looked at him carefully. "What happens now? To Celine? To the investigation? To us?" Damien met her eyes steadily. "Now, we make sure the council understands the full truth of what happened, so your name is cleared completely, without doubt or lingering suspicion. As for us," he paused, choosing his next words carefully, "I think we're only beginning to understand what that even means." Elena felt her heart quicken unexpectedly at his words, uncertain whether the sensation came from the mark's pull or something far more human stirring quietly beneath the surface of her fear and confusion. Outside the chamber, unaware that her scheme had already unraveled completely, Celine sat in her private quarters, confident her plan remained hidden, already preparing her next move to ensure the throne did not slip entirely from her grasp. Celine's confidence cracked the moment 2 guards arrived at her chambers with orders to escort her before the council immediately. She had expected time, more moves to make, more threads to pull, before anyone connected her to the scheme. Instead, she found herself standing in the same grand hall where Damien had been crowned days earlier, facing the same elders, who now regarded her with cold, unreadable expressions. "Celine of House Ashford," Elder Nathaniel began, his voice carrying the weight of formal judgment. "You stand accused of orchestrating the deception that led to King Damien's mate mark forming under manipulated circumstances, of threatening a member of the king's personal guard into compliance, and of endangering pack stability for personal political gain. How do you answer these charges?" Celine's eyes flickered briefly toward Damien, searching for any sign of the affection that once lived between them, any hesitation she might use to her advantage. She found none. His expression remained carved from stone, giving her nothing to work with. "These are serious accusations, built on the word of a frightened guard captain," Celine said smoothly, though a thin thread of desperation had crept into her voice. "Where is the actual proof beyond a man's claim made under pressure?" "The ring matching the one you were seen wearing regularly, described by a stable hand who had no reason to lie, combined with Caleb's detailed and consistent account, provides sufficient evidence," Nathaniel replied firmly. "Furthermore, our investigators discovered altered records in the guard roster archive, records only someone with your level of access to the administrative hall could have modified." Celine's composure finally began to slip, color draining from her face, as she realized how thoroughly her scheme had unraveled. "I only wanted what was best for this pack," she said, her voice rising with desperation now. Damien was clearly not thinking clearly that night. "I feared what damage his poor judgment might cause during his own coronation. Everything I did to protect Blackwood Pack from instability. By drugging an innocent woman and forcing a permanent bond onto her without consent," Damien's voice cut through the hall, sharp and unforgiving. "By threatening a loyal guard's family to secure his cooperation. Those are not the actions of someone protecting this pack, Celine. Those are the actions of someone willing to destroy anyone standing between her and the throne." Silence fell over the hall as the truth settled fully into everyone's understanding. Even those nobles who had once whispered sympathetically about Celine's supposed concern for pack stability now looked at her with clear disapproval. The mask of reasonable dignity she had worked so carefully to maintain, finally shattered beyond repair. Elder Nathaniel exchanged glances with the other council members before delivering the verdict. "Celine of House Ashford, you are hereby stripped of all standing within Blackwood Pack. You are banished from these territories effective immediately, forbidden from returning without explicit council approval. Your family's political influence within the pack will be significantly reduced as consequence for your actions." Gasps rippled through the crowd at the severity of the punishment, though few voices rose in protest given the clarity of her guilt. Celine stood frozen for a moment, disbelief written across her face, before her expression hardened into something colder, more calculating. "You'll regret this," she said quietly, her gaze shifting toward Elena, who stood near the edge of the hall, watching the proceedings, with a mixture of relief and unease. "Both of you will regret choosing her over the stability I could have offered this pack." Guards moved forward to escort her from the hall, her final words hanging ominously in the air, as she was led away, banished from the only home she had ever known. Later that evening, as the castle slowly settled back into its normal rhythms following the dramatic events of the trial, Elena found herself walking through the quiet garden behind the main hall, needing space to process everything that had unfolded. The night air felt cool against her skin, a welcome relief after the tension of the day. She wasn't entirely surprised when Damien's footsteps approached from behind, though she hadn't expected him to seek her out so soon after the trial. "I thought I might find you out here," he said, coming to stand beside her near a stone fountain at the garden's center. "I needed air," Elena admitted. Watching someone's entire life unravel in front of an entire hall, even someone who caused so much harm, isn't something I expected to feel conflicted about. "You have a kinder heart than most people in my position," Damien observed quietly. "Or maybe I just understand what it feels like to have your life turned upside down by circumstances outside your control," Elena countered, even if her circumstances were entirely of her own making. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching moonlight ripple across the fountain's surface, before Elena spoke again, unable to hold back the question weighing on her mind. "Are you all right?" Seeing her banished, hearing everything she admitted to doing. That can't have been easy, regardless of what she did. Damien considered the question seriously, before answering. "It's strange. I expected to feel angrier than I do, or perhaps more heartbroken. Instead, mostly I just feel tired, and relieved that the truth finally came out, even if the path to reach it caused so much unnecessary harm." "Relief seems like a reasonable response," Elena said gently. Damien turned to look at her fully then, moonlight catching the sharp lines of his face, something thoughtful and searching in his expression. "Can I ask you something, now that the investigation has concluded and your name has been fully cleared?" Elena nodded, curiosity mixing with a flicker of nervousness at his tone. "Now that you're free to leave, now that the council has confirmed your innocence and the immediate danger has passed, do you want to return to your old life? I would understand completely if you did. No one would force you to remain bonded to a king you never chose, trapped in a life shaped entirely by someone else's manipulation." The question caught Elena off guard, though she supposed it was fair, given everything that had happened. She considered her answer carefully rather than rushing into a response. "A few days ago, I would have said yes without hesitation," she admitted honestly. "I missed my old life terribly. The simplicity of grinding herbs and helping sick villagers, having control over my own days without 100 eyes watching my every move and judging my worthiness." "And now?" Damien asked, something guarded in his voice, as if bracing for an answer he expected to disappoint him. "Now I'm not entirely sure anymore," Elena said slowly. "The mark connects us regardless of what I choose next, doesn't it? Even if I left, even if I returned to the medical hall and tried to pretend none of this happened, the bond would still exist between us." "It would," Damien confirmed. "Marks don't fade simply because one person walks away from the situation. But that doesn't mean you're obligated to remain here, playing a role you never wanted, simply because the bond exists." Elena studied him carefully, searching for what he truly wanted her answer to be, though his expression remained carefully neutral, giving nothing away. "What do you want, Damien? Not what obligation or duty demands, but honestly, what do you want regarding this situation?" He was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with an honest answer, rather than a diplomatic one. "I want you to choose freely, without pressure from politics or duty, or fear of disappointing anyone. If that choice means leaving, I will ensure you're protected and provided for regardless. But if I'm being completely honest," he continued, his voice softening slightly, "these past few days, getting to know you beyond the chaos surrounding us, I've found myself hoping you might choose to stay." Elena's breath caught at his admission, surprised by the vulnerability in his tone, so different from the composed, controlled king she had witnessed navigating council meetings and political schemes with unwavering confidence. Before she could formulate a response, urgent footsteps approached rapidly along the garden path, Marcus appearing with visible tension etched across his features, interrupting the delicate moment building between them. "My king, forgive the interruption, but we've received urgent news. Scouts report movement along our northern border. It appears Ashcliff pack forces are gathering in numbers far exceeding normal patrol activity." Damien's expression shifted immediately from personal reflection to sharp military focus. Ashcliff pack? Their territory hasn't bordered ours in active conflict for generations. What could explain such movement now? "We're not certain yet," Marcus admitted, "but the timing feels suspicious, coming so soon after Celine's banishment. It's possible she's already sought allies elsewhere, hoping to destabilize your reign through external pressure, now that internal schemes have failed." Elena felt a chill run through her at the implication. The personal conversation moments earlier suddenly overshadowed by looming danger far larger than court politics and personal betrayals. "You think Celine would actually turn to a rival pack against her own people?" "I wouldn't put it past her," Damien said grimly, "especially now that she has nothing left to lose within Blackwood territory." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I've already alerted the border patrols to increase vigilance and called for additional scouts to gather more precise information. But my king, if this escalates into actual conflict, we need to prepare accordingly, and quickly." Damien turned briefly back toward Elena, regret flickering across his features at the interruption to their conversation, though urgency clearly took precedence now. "We'll continue this discussion soon," he promised quietly, "but right now, I need to address this threat before it grows beyond our ability to control it." Elena nodded, understanding completely, despite the ache of unfinished conversation lingering between them. "Go. Protecting the pack matters more than finishing our conversation tonight." As Damien departed swiftly alongside Marcus to gather his war council and assess the growing threat along the northern border, Elena remained standing alone in the quiet garden, moonlight still rippling gently across the fountain's surface, though the peaceful atmosphere now felt fragile against the storm, clearly gathering on the horizon. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring toward the northern horizon, where danger apparently loomed closer with each passing hour, and found herself wondering, with a mixture of fear and unexpected clarity, whether the true test of her place within this pack, within this uncertain bond forged by chaos and deception, was only just beginning. Horns blared through Blackwood Castle in the middle of the night, jolting Elena from restless sleep. She bolted upright, heart pounding, as shouts echoed through the corridors outside her chamber, boots pounding against stone floors, urgent voices calling orders back and forth. She threw on the nearest clothes and rushed into the hallway, colliding almost immediately with Grace, who looked equally alarmed. "What's happening?" Elena demanded. "Ashcliff forces crossed the border an hour ago," Grace said breathlessly, already moving toward the medical hall, gesturing for Elena to follow. "They struck the northern outpost without warning. Wounded warriors are being brought back as we speak. Every healer in the castle is needed immediately." Elena's training took over instantly, years of experience in the medical hall pushing aside her fear as she followed Grace through the chaotic corridors toward the healing wing. The moment she stepped through the doors, the scene that greeted her confirmed the severity of the situation. Wounded warriors filled every available cot, blood-staining bandages faster than healers could replace them, groans of pain mixing with sharp instructions being shouted across the crowded room. "Elena, thank the moon you're here," an older healer named Miriam called out, waving her toward a warrior, whose leg had been torn open by claws, blood pooling dangerously beneath him. "I need help stabilizing this wound, before we lose him." Elena rushed forward without hesitation, her hands moving with practiced precision as she pressed clean cloth against the wound, calling for specific herbs to slow the bleeding, while Miriam worked to close the deeper damage. Hours blurred together as warrior after warrior arrived, each requiring immediate attention, the healing hall transforming into a battlefield of its own, as healers fought desperately to keep pace with the arriving wounded. Somewhere in the chaos, word reached Elena that Damien himself had ridden out to lead the counterattack personally, refusing to remain safely within castle walls while his people faced danger on the front lines. The news sent a sharp spike of fear through her chest, though she forced herself to focus on the wounded before her, rather than dwelling on dangers she couldn't control. As dawn broke, gray light filtering weakly through the healing hall's windows, A commotion arose near the entrance. Elena looked up from the wound she was tending to see warriors carrying someone through the doors on a makeshift stretcher, blood soaking through torn armor, dark hair matted with sweat and dirt. Damien. Elena's heart stopped for a single terrifying moment before instinct propelled her forward, pushing through the crowd of healers and warriors surrounding the stretcher.
"Let me through,"
she demanded, her voice carrying more authority than she had ever used before. Something in her tone, perhaps enhanced by the Mark's connection between them, made people step aside instinctively. She reached his side and immediately assessed the damage, a deep gash across his ribs, still bleeding heavily, another wound along his shoulder that had likely come from claws rather than a blade. His eyes were open but unfocused, breathing shallow and ragged. "He took a hit protecting one of our younger warriors," Marcus explained urgently, having followed the stretcher into the healing hall himself, his own armor dented and bloodied from battle. "The wound isn't closing properly, even with his enhanced healing. Something's wrong." Elena examined the wound more closely, her healer's instincts immediately noticing something unusual about the injury, an odd discoloration around the edges that shouldn't be present in a normal claw wound. "This wasn't a natural attack," she said slowly, memory sparking from old texts she had studied years ago in her mother's healing library. "There's something in the wound preventing proper healing. Poison, possibly something designed specifically to weaken enhanced healing abilities." "Can you treat it?" Marcus asked urgently, fear evident beneath his controlled exterior. Elena's mind raced through possibilities, recalling rare herbs her mother had once taught her about. Plants, specifically known for countering healing suppression, though such knowledge had always seemed more theoretical than practical until this exact moment. "I need silverleaf root and crushed moonflower petals, combined with pure spring water, not the well water we typically use. It needs to be prepared exactly right, or it won't counter the poison effectively." "I'll get whatever you need," Grace said immediately, already moving toward the storage room where rare herbs were kept. While Grace rushed to gather ingredients, Elena worked quickly to clean the wound, as thoroughly as possible, buying time against the poison's progression. Damien's eyes fluttered, focusing weakly on her face despite his obvious pain. "Elena," he murmured, voice rough and strained. "Don't talk," she said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly despite her steady voice. "Save your strength. I'm going to fix this." "Knew you would," he managed, a faint, pained smile ghosting across his lips. "Despite everything, healer's daughter turned queen, saving my life twice in 1 week." "Focus on staying alive, not flattering me," Elena said, though something in her chest tightened painfully at his words. Fear, and something warmer, intertwining uncomfortably within her. Grace returned moments later with the requested herbs, and Elena immediately began preparing the antidote with careful precision, grinding the silverleaf root into fine powder, combining it with crushed moonflower petals and spring water in exact proportions she barely remembered from childhood lessons. Her hands moved with a confidence that surprised even herself, as if some deeper instinct guided her beyond simple memorized knowledge. Once the mixture was ready, she applied it carefully to the wound, watching anxiously as the discoloration slowly began to fade, the poison's dark influence gradually retreating beneath the antidote's power. Damien's breathing steadied gradually, color slowly returning to his face as his body's natural healing finally began working properly again, no longer suppressed by whatever poison had been used against him. "It's working," Miriam confirmed, checking his pulse carefully. "His vitals are stabilizing. Well done, Elena. I've never seen anyone identify and treat suppression poison that quickly, not even healers with decades more experience than you." Elena barely registered the praise, exhaustion and relief crashing over her simultaneously, as she watched Damien's breathing settle into a steadier, healthier rhythm. She hadn't realized how tightly fear had gripped her chest, until it finally began to loosen with his stabilization. Over the following hours, as the immediate crisis passed, and the battle outside gradually turned in Blackwood Pack's favor, thanks to reinforcements finally arriving at the northern border, Elena remained close to Damien's side, monitoring his recovery, even as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her own body. By late afternoon, reports confirmed that Ashcliff forces had retreated entirely. Their surprise attack ultimately failed against Blackwood's organized counterattack. Marcus arrived with further news, his expression grim despite the victory. We captured several Ashcliff warriors during the retreat, he informed Damien, who had regained enough strength to sit upright, though clearly still weakened from his injuries. Under questioning, one of them revealed that Celine had indeed approached their alpha, directly following her banishment, offering information about our defenses, in exchange for support in reclaiming her position here. Damien's expression hardened despite his weakened state. She truly was willing to sacrifice pack lives for her own ambition. It appears so, Marcus confirmed grimly. Ashcliff's alpha apparently saw an opportunity to weaken a rival pack during a moment of internal instability, using Celine's information about troop movements and defense schedules to plan their surprise attack. Elena, who had been quietly organizing medical supplies nearby, felt anger rise sharply at the confirmation of Celine's continued betrayal, even after banishment, even after losing everything within Blackwood Pack. How many warriors were lost? She asked quietly, dreading the answer. 12 confirmed dead, dozens more wounded, Marcus said heavily. It could have been far worse without the swift counterattack, and without your quick thinking regarding the poison used against the king. Damien reached out, surprising Elena by gently taking her hand, despite his weakened condition. You saved my life today, he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Not through the mark's magic, not through any bond, neither of us chose, but through your own skill, your own courage, running toward danger, when every instinct might have told you to stay safely away. I couldn't just stand by, Elena said simply, though warmth spread through her chest at his words. Regardless of how this bond started, I wasn't about to let you die without trying everything I could to prevent it. That evening, once Damien had regained enough strength to move without assistance, he insisted on addressing the gathered warriors and remaining nobles within the castle's main hall, despite Marcus's concerns about him pushing himself too hard so soon after his injuries. Standing before the crowd, visible bandages still wrapped around his ribs beneath his clothing, Damien spoke with quiet but unmistakable authority. Today, Blackwood Pack faced betrayal and attack, orchestrated by someone who once stood among us, someone who chose personal ambition over the safety of every warrior who bled defending our territory. We honor those we lost, and we will ensure Ashcliff Pack understands clearly that such aggression carries lasting consequences. The hall remained silent, warriors and nobles alike listening intently as their king continued. I also want to address something else clearly, before rumors have the chance to distort the truth once again, Damien said, his gaze finding Elena where she stood near the edge of the hall, still exhausted from the long hours spent treating wounded warriors. Elena Ross saved my life today, not through obligation, not through the mark that bonds us, but through her own courage and skill. I have spent recent days uncertain about many things regarding our unexpected bond, but today removed all remaining doubt from my mind. Elena's heart raced as every eye in the hall turned toward her, though this time the attention felt different from the suspicious, judgmental stares she had endured during the earlier investigation. Elena is not simply someone caught in circumstances beyond her control, Damien continued, his voice steady and clear, despite the vulnerability evident beneath his words. She is someone whose strength, intelligence, and compassion have earned my genuine respect and admiration, entirely separate from any bond forced upon us by another's cruel manipulation. I choose her, not because law or circumstance demands it, but because I have come to know her character these past days, and I find myself grateful, rather than resentful, for the twist of fate that brought her into my life. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the hall, though this time filled with something closer to approval than suspicion, many warriors nodding respectfully toward Elena, having witnessed firsthand her skill and courage during the crisis that had nearly claimed their king's life. Elena felt tears sting her eyes, overwhelmed by the public declaration, by the shift in how the pack now regarded her, by the warmth spreading through her chest at Damien's words. She had spent days uncertain whether she truly belonged within these walls, whether the bond connecting them would ever grow into something genuine, rather than simply obligatory circumstance. Now, watching Damien stand before his entire pack, weakened by injury yet unwavering in his declaration, she finally allowed herself to believe that perhaps this unexpected path, however chaotic its beginning, might lead somewhere worth embracing after all. As the hall slowly emptied following Damien's address, warriors returning to their duties, and nobles dispersing to spread word of the day's dramatic events. Elena remained standing quietly near him, both of them finally alone, amid the aftermath of battle and betrayal. "Did you mean everything you said?" she asked softly, still processing the weight of his public declaration. "Every word," Damien confirmed, reaching for her hand once more, his fingers intertwining gently with hers. "I should have said it sooner, honestly, rather than hiding behind careful distance and cautious uncertainty. Today reminded me how quickly everything can change, how little time we sometimes have to say what truly matters." Elena squeezed his hand gently, warmth and hope finally overtaking the fear and uncertainty that had defined so much of the past turbulent week. "Then let's not waste more time hiding behind uncertainty," she said quietly. "Whatever comes next, Ashcliffe's continued threats, rebuilding trust within the pack, figuring out what this bond truly means for both of us. Let's face it honestly, together." Damien smiled, genuine warmth reaching his tired eyes despite the exhaustion and pain still lingering from his injuries. "Together," he agreed softly, "exactly as it should be." 3 weeks passed, following the battle at the northern border, weeks filled with the steady work of rebuilding, rather than dramatic confrontation. Damien's wounds healed fully under Elena's continued care, though he insisted on returning to his duties long before Miriam thought wise, driven by the need to strengthen Blackwood Pack's defenses against any further threat from Ashcliff territory. Elena found herself settling into an unexpected rhythm within the castle, no longer viewed with suspicion by the nobles who had once whispered cruel theories about her sudden appearance in the king's life. Warriors she had treated during the crisis greeted her warmly whenever their paths crossed, some even seeking her out specifically in the medical hall, trusting her skill over other healers with more traditional standing. Grace had become a genuine friend rather than simply an assigned tutor, the two of them sharing meals and easy conversation that had nothing to do with etiquette lessons or political maneuvering. Yet despite the growing acceptance and the warmth steadily building between Elena and Damien, one matter remained unresolved. The council had never formally confirmed her status as Luna, the investigation technically concluded, but the final ceremonial confirmation postponed repeatedly, due to the urgent demands of managing Ashcliff tensions and rebuilding the northern outposts, damaged during the attack. "The council meets again tomorrow," Marcus informed them both one evening, as they gathered for dinner, in Damien's private chambers, a routine that had become comfortably familiar over recent weeks. "Elder Nathaniel intends to formally address your bond's confirmation this time. No more postponements." Elena felt a flutter of nervousness at the news, though far different from the fear that had gripped her during the earlier investigation. This time, uncertainty stemmed not from doubt about her own worthiness, but simply from the natural weight of a decision that would permanently shape the rest of her life. "Are you ready?" Damien asked gently, noticing the flicker of nerves crossing her expression. "I think so," Elena said honestly. "Though I never imagined my life taking this particular path when I was simply grinding herbs in my mother's healing hall a few months ago." "Life rarely follows the paths we imagine," Damien said with a soft smile. "Sometimes the unexpected paths lead somewhere far better than anything we could have planned." The following morning, the grand hall filled once again with nobles, warriors, and council elders, though the atmosphere felt entirely different from the tense uncertainty that had marked Elena's first appearance before this same crowd weeks earlier. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting warm light across the stone floors, a stark contrast to the shadowed unease of that earlier morning. Elder Nathaniel rose from his seat as Damien and Elena entered together, standing side by side, rather than the careful distance they had maintained during their first public appearance as marked partners. "We gather today," Nathaniel began, his voice carrying clearly through the silent hall, "to formally address the bond between King Damien Blackwood and Elena Ross, following the thorough investigation into the circumstances surrounding their mark's formation, and following recent events that have demonstrated clearly the character and worth of the woman standing beside our king." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, warriors who had witnessed Elena's skill during the crisis nodding respectfully, nobles who had once doubted her now recognizing the genuine strength she had demonstrated when the pack needed it most. The investigation confirmed unequivocally that Elena Ross bears no responsibility for the manner in which this bond was formed, Nathaniel continued. Rather, she was herself a victim of deception, orchestrated by Celine of House Ashford, whose subsequent betrayal in allying with Ashcliffe Pack has confirmed beyond any doubt the depths of her willingness to harm this pack for personal ambition. At the mention of Celine's name, several nobles shifted uncomfortably, the memory of her banishment and subsequent treachery still fresh enough to sting, particularly among families who had once considered her a promising future Luna before her true character was revealed. Furthermore, Nathaniel continued, Elena's actions during the recent crisis, identifying and treating a rare suppression poison that nearly claimed our king's life, demonstrate exceptional skill and unwavering courage, befitting the position she now stands to formally claim. Damien stepped forward then, taking Elena's hand gently, as he addressed the council directly. I stand before you today not simply accepting a bond forced upon me by circumstances beyond my control, but choosing, freely and completely, to claim Elena Ross as my Luna. This choice stems not from obligation, but from genuine respect, admiration, and affection that has grown steadily since the day fate first brought us together, however chaotic that beginning may have been. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, gratitude and love intertwining as she looked around the hall, seeing genuine support reflected in the faces surrounding her, rather than the suspicion and doubt she had once feared permanently. Elder Nathaniel nodded solemnly, clearly satisfied with the sincerity evident in Damien's declaration. Then let it be formally recorded and recognized throughout Blackwood territory. Elena Ross is confirmed as Luna of Blackwood Pack, bonded rightfully and permanently to King Damien Blackwood, with full status, respect, and protection befitting her position. The hall erupted into applause, warm and genuine, entirely different from the hollow ceremonial clapping that had marked Damien's coronation weeks earlier. Elena felt tears sting her eyes once again, though this time from pure joy, rather than overwhelming fear and uncertainty. Following the formal confirmation, a celebration was held that evening throughout the castle, warriors and nobles alike gathering to properly welcome their new Luna, the earlier scandal and suspicion, finally replaced by genuine acceptance and respect. Elena found herself surrounded by well-wishes from people who had once eyed her with distrust, their sincerity now evident, in a way that touched her deeply after everything she had endured to reach this point. Later that night, once the celebration had gradually wound down and most guests had retired to their own chambers, Elena found herself standing on a balcony overlooking the castle grounds, moonlight bathing the peaceful scene below in soft silver light. Damien joined her quietly, wrapping an arm gently around her shoulders as they both gazed out over the territory, now formally hers to protect and care for alongside him. How are you feeling? He asked softly, genuine concern evident in his voice despite the joyful atmosphere of the day. Overwhelmed, Elena admitted honestly, leaning slightly into his warmth, but in the best possible way. A few months ago, I never could have imagined standing here as Luna of Blackwood Pack, formally recognized and respected by everyone who once doubted me. You earned every bit of that respect, Damien said firmly, through your own strength and character, regardless of how our bond first began. Elena turned to face him fully, studying his expression carefully in the soft moonlight. Do you ever think about that night still? The wolfsbane wine, the confusion, everything that led to this unexpected beginning? Damien considered the question thoughtfully before answering. Sometimes. Mostly I think about how strange it is that something born from Celine's cruelty and my own moment of weakness somehow led to finding someone whose presence in my life now feels essential rather than accidental. That is strange, Elena agreed softly, though I suppose most meaningful things in life rarely follow the paths we expect. They stood together in comfortable silence for a while, watching moonlight play across the castle grounds, before Elena spoke again, curiosity mixing with genuine care in her voice. What about Ashcliffe Pack? Do you think this conflict is truly finished, or should we expect further trouble ahead? Damien's expression grew more serious, though not alarmed. Ashcliffe's Alpha understands clearly now that further aggression against Blackwood Pack carries severe consequences, particularly after their forces suffered significant losses during their failed attack. I don't expect immediate further conflict, though we'll certainly remain vigilant along our borders going forward. And Celine? Elena asked carefully, uncertain whether the topic still carried difficult emotions for him. Do you think she'll attempt further schemes from wherever she's taken refuge now? It's possible, Damien admitted honestly. Someone as ambitious and willing to cause harm as she's proven herself to be rarely simply accepts defeat quietly, but will face whatever challenges arise together, prepared and united, rather than caught unaware as we were during her initial scheme. Elena nodded, comforted by his confidence, and by the genuine partnership evident in his words. No longer simply a king making decisions alone, but someone who saw her as an equal partner in navigating whatever challenges their future together might hold. "I'm glad," she said softly, "that despite everything, despite the chaos and danger and uncertainty of these past weeks, we found our way to this moment together." Damien smiled warmly, pulling her closer against him as they continued gazing out over the peaceful territory below. "So am I," he said quietly. "Whatever challenges Ashcliff Pack or Celine's continued ambition might bring in the future, I know now that facing them alongside you makes every difficulty feel manageable, rather than overwhelming." As the moon continued its slow journey across the star-filled sky above Blackwood Castle, Elena finally allowed herself to fully embrace the unexpected path her life had taken, grateful not for the chaos and manipulation that had initially brought her and Damien together, but for the genuine connection, respect, and love that had grown steadily from those difficult beginnings into something she now recognized as truly meaningful. The healer's daughter, who had once ground herbs quietly in her mother's medical hall, now stood confidently as Luna of Blackwood Pack, her strength and courage no longer questioned by anyone who had witnessed her unwavering dedication during the pack's darkest recent hours. And as she stood there in Damien's warm embrace, watching moonlight bathe their territory in peaceful silver light, Elena finally understood that sometimes the most meaningful beginnings arise not from careful planning or expected circumstances, but from the courage to embrace whatever unexpected path life chooses to offer, and the strength to build something genuine and lasting from even the most chaotic of starts. Their story, born from a drunken mistake that once seemed destined to bring only scandal and hardship, had ultimately become something far stronger and more meaningful than either of them could have anticipated that first confusing morning. A true partnership, built on courage, honesty, and a bond that, however unexpectedly formed, had proven genuine in every way that truly mattered. Winter settled over Blackwood territory months later, snow blanketing the training grounds where warriors still drilled each morning despite the cold, smoke rising steadily from chimneys across the castle as the pack prepared for the coldest stretch of the season. Elena had grown fully into her role as Luna by then, no longer requiring Grace's careful reminders about posture or etiquette, her natural confidence now matching the respect she commanded throughout the territory. She spent her mornings in the medical hall still, refusing to abandon her healing work despite her elevated status, insisting that a Luna who understood her people's suffering firsthand could govern with far more compassion than one who ruled from a distance. Many nobles had initially questioned this choice, though most had come to admire her dedication rather than criticize it, particularly the common folk who had grown to trust her judgment completely. One frozen morning, as Elena prepared herbs for warriors suffering from winter fevers, a messenger arrived breathlessly at the medical hall's entrance, snow still clinging to his cloak. "Luna Elena, the king requests your presence immediately in the War Council chamber. It concerns Ashcliff territory." Elena's stomach tightened with familiar worry as she quickly cleaned her hands and followed the messenger through the frost-covered corridors toward the chamber where Damien typically met with Marcus and other trusted advisors to discuss matters of security and diplomacy. When she arrived, she found the room tense, Damien standing over a map spread across the central table, his expression grave. "Elena," he said, looking up as she entered, "scouts have confirmed Celine was spotted near Ashcliff's southern border, apparently attempting once again to rally support for another attempt against us." "After everything that happened during the last attack?" Elena asked, disbelief mixing with frustration at Celine's continued refusal to accept defeat. "It seems her ambition remains undiminished, despite repeated failure," Marcus said grimly. "However, this time, Ashcliff's Alpha appears far less receptive to her proposals. Our scouts report she was turned away from their territory entirely, her reputation apparently having suffered significantly following the failed attack she helped orchestrate." "Where is she now?" Elena asked. "Wandering, it seems, without allies or resources," Damien said. Reports suggest she's been reduced to seeking shelter among smaller, less powerful packs along the eastern borderlands, her influence and connections steadily crumbling with each rejected plea for support. Elena felt a complicated mixture of emotions at the news, some satisfaction that Celine's continued scheming had finally failed to find fertile ground, though also a flicker of something like pity for someone whose relentless ambition had cost her everything she once possessed. Should we be concerned she'll attempt something more desperate now that she has nothing left to lose? Elena asked, practical concerns overtaking her more complicated feelings. We remain vigilant regardless, Damien confirmed, but a woman without allies, resources, or reputation poses far less genuine threat than she once did. I've instructed our border patrols to remain alert for any sign of her, though I suspect her days of orchestrating meaningful schemes against this pack have largely ended. The following weeks confirmed Damien's assessment. Reports trickled in periodically about Celine's continued wandering, each account describing someone increasingly desperate and increasingly ignored by packs unwilling to risk their own stability by harboring someone with such a thoroughly ruined reputation. Eventually, the reports simply stopped altogether, Celine apparently having faded entirely from relevance within the region's political landscape, her ambitious schemes ultimately amounting to nothing beyond her own downfall. With that lingering threat finally diminished, Elena found herself able to focus more fully on the steady work of building a genuine life alongside Damien, free from the constant undercurrent of danger that had defined their earlier months together. Their partnership deepened steadily through countless small moments, quiet mornings sharing tea before Damien's council meetings, evenings spent discussing pack matters together as genuine equals, occasional afternoons where Damien would surprise her by joining her in the medical hall, awkwardly attempting to assist with tasks far outside his usual expertise, more interested in spending time near her than in his supposed medical skills. Spring arrived eventually, bringing warmth and renewal to Blackwood territory after the long winter months. Elena stood one morning in the castle gardens, tending carefully to medicinal herbs she had personally planted months earlier, when Damien approached with news that immediately brightened his typically composed expression. Ashcliff Pack has formally requested peace negotiations, he announced, genuine relief evident in his voice. Their new council, having removed their previous alpha following the disastrous consequences of last year's attack, wishes to establish proper boundaries and trade agreements between our territories going forward. That's wonderful news, Elena said, genuine happiness spreading through her at the prospect of lasting peace between their territories. Does this mean an end to the border tensions that have lingered since the attack? It appears so, Damien confirmed. Their new leadership seems genuinely interested in stability, rather than continued conflict, recognizing that Celine's manipulation led them into a costly and ultimately pointless confrontation. Elena felt profound relief at the news, understanding clearly how much lasting peace would mean for both territories, allowing warriors on both sides to finally set aside the constant vigilance that conflict demanded, allowing ordinary families to focus on rebuilding and prosperity, rather than fear of renewed attack. The peace negotiations proceeded smoothly over the following weeks, Damien and Elena traveling personally to the border to meet with Ashcliff's new leadership, establishing clear boundaries and trade agreements that would benefit both packs moving forward. Elena's diplomatic skills, honed through months of navigating complex pack politics since her unexpected rise to Luna, proved invaluable during these negotiations, her genuine warmth and straightforward honesty earning respect from Ashcliff's representatives, who had expected a far more calculating approach from Blackwood's leadership. By early summer, formal peace had been established between the two territories, trade routes reopened, and border patrols scaled back to peacetime levels rather than the heightened vigilance that had defined the previous year. Blackwood Pack, having weathered scandal, betrayal, and conflict, finally settled into a period of genuine stability and prosperity under Damien and Elena's joint leadership. One warm evening, as summer flowers bloomed throughout the castle gardens, Elena found Damien waiting for her near the same fountain where they had once discussed her possible departure from Blackwood territory, back when their bond still felt uncertain and fragile. The memory brought a soft smile to her face as she approached him, noticing something different in his expression that evening, a nervous energy unusual for someone typically so composed. "You look like you have something on your mind," Elena observed, settling beside him near the fountain's edge. "I do, actually," Damien admitted, taking her hand gently. I've been thinking about how far we've come since that chaotic morning, when we first woke to find ourselves bonded by circumstances neither of us chose. It's been quite a journey, Elena agreed softly. It has, Damien confirmed. And throughout everything, the scandal, the investigation, Celine's betrayal, the attack, the difficult months rebuilding trust and stability, you've remained steady, courageous, and genuinely caring toward everyone around you, including me, even when I gave you little reason to trust my intentions during those early uncertain days. Elena felt warmth spreading through her chest at his words, though she sensed he was building toward something beyond simple reflection. What are you trying to say, Damien? He smiled then, genuine and warm, reaching into his pocket to retrieve something small that caught the evening light as he opened his palm. I know we're already bonded, already Luna and King, already committed to one another, through the mark that first brought us together. But I wanted to give you something that represents a choice, made freely, entirely separate from circumstances or obligation, a symbol of my own genuine commitment to building a life together, regardless of how unconventionally that life began. Elena stared at the delicate ring resting in his palm, simple but elegant, clearly crafted with careful thought rather than hasty impulse. Tears gathered in her eyes as understanding settled over her, the weight and meaning behind his gesture clear despite their bond already existing through the mark. Damien, she whispered, overwhelmed by the sincerity evident in his expression. I love you, he said simply, the words carrying the full weight of everything they had endured together since that chaotic first morning. Not because the mark demands it, not because circumstance forced our lives together, but because I have genuinely come to know and love the remarkable woman you are, entirely separate from any bond neither of us initially chose. I love you too, Elena said softly, her voice thick with emotion as she accepted the ring, sliding it carefully onto her finger, alongside the mark that had first brought them together so unexpectedly, completely, and by my own free choice, regardless of how our story began. As evening settled fully over Blackwood territory, the fountain's gentle sound mixing peacefully with distant laughter, from warriors and families enjoying the warm summer evening throughout the castle grounds, Elena and Damien remained together near the water's edge, their bond now strengthened not merely by fate's unexpected intervention, but by genuine love, freely chosen, and steadily built through shared hardship, courage, and unwavering commitment to one another. Their story, born from confusion and scandal on a single chaotic night, had ultimately transformed into something neither of them could have predicted that first uncertain morning, a partnership defined not by how it began, but by the genuine strength, respect, and love that had steadily grown between them, proving that even the most unlikely beginnings could lead toward a future built on something truly lasting and real.